Hey there, welcome to the Game Artist Podcast. My name is Ryan Kingsline. I am the founder of the Game Art Institute, where we train artists for the career of their lives. In this podcast, we interview amazing game artists to see what makes them tick and see how they got where they are today. So sit back, relax. I look forward to sharing their journey with you. All right, welcome to the podcast, guys. Thanks for joining. Those of you who are here with me live, thanks for joining. We have a group of students from the boot camp that are here, and Floyd, thank you so much for being here. We're actually looking at Floyd's screen right now, and Floyd Billingy. Did I screw it up?
Yep. No, perfect.
I'm like, you know what? Are you good with names, or are you horrible with names?
I'm absolutely terrible. Someone could tell me their name, and then like 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh, I've forgotten it.
I know, right? I saw a neighbor down the street. I know the neighbor. I've been to parties with the neighbor, and I'm like, Kristen, and she didn't turn around, Kristen, and then I got her attention, and then my wife's like, her name's Kelly.
Oh,
And I
yeah,
was
it's
like,
horrible.
oh my God, I'm so horrible with these things.
That
But
sinking feeling in your stomach. You're like, oh, I've
yes,
missed
it is. I'm embarrassed. So last night I'm going to sleep. Kelly, name's Kelly. You know, next time I see her, her name's Kelly.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
like that. So, my friend, tell me, let's get a little introduction to you and to what you do.
Okay.
Besides, obviously create amazing artwork. Where are you working now?
So at the moment, I'm working at Axis in Glasgow.
Hmm.
I'm working on cinematics, mostly for games, some stuff for TV. It's a bit of a change of pace from what I was doing previously at like Splash Damage and stuff, which was,
Hmm.
and anywhere else I've worked, which has been predominantly games, in-game, real-time stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I just thought it would be a nice change of pace. I enjoyed making games and the whole dev cycle. Just I just thought sometimes things go on for like 2 years or longer. It might be nice to just get into a bit of a situation where I'm on shorter projects, and there's a quicker turnaround on things. So I thought I would give cinematics a try and see who in the UK was available to be able to do that with. So yeah, I moved up to Scotland, been working at Axis, really enjoying it. It's a great place to work.
That's great. So, is that are they're not working with their own properties, but they're kind of hired to do cinematics?
Yeah, so we do cinematics for, I mean, we have, the studio has done, I say we, this was before I was there,
Yeah.
has done their own VR cinematic, I suppose you would call it, called The Bond, which everyone could check out,
Yeah.
which is awesome. So they do in downtime their own IPs, but mostly, yes, guns for hire for cinematics for other studios, in the same way that I guess like Blur does things or people like that.
Totally. What got you into this, or how long have you been in this? I should
Uh,
ask. You're on Gears of War. We see that, so you're old hat to some extent. But how long have you been in?
yeah. Oh, you make me feel old. When
Wait until
I
I tell you how old I am. You'll feel young.
I left university. Goodness. I think I've been in it maybe 7 or 7.5 years now, which is
Yeah.
crazy back like that. Um, yeah, it's the only thing I've ever really wanted to do. Um, so yeah, I guess that we're quite lucky in being gamers that there's this thing that we can do, and you can just continue playing and making games for like the rest of your life. It's
Hmm.
possible. So yeah, I don't know. It was quite natural. I always wanted to do this. In what capacity, I had no idea as a child, I guess. In playing games, I just always knew that I wanted to be involved in how they're made, um, whether that be storytelling or doing environment art or whatever. I really found doing this at university, where my course was structured in a way that we all had to do a little bit of animation, a little bit of rigging, a little bit of 3D, and I just enjoyed this the most.
Hmm.
So I just pushed this, and in your last year, you could kind of what's the word? You could just choose to do one thing. So
Right.
in the first 2 years, we did a bunch of different things, and then in the last year, you could just choose to do the one thing and then push it and make like a cinematic or an in-game level or something like that. So that was where I decided that I wanted to be an environment artist. And from then, that's all I've ever really wanted to do. So I've only ever really done that in my personal work. I guess it means that unfortunately, I have no characters in my portfolio that I could ever call mine. And
Hmm.
the VFX that I've done, I guess, in things, and some of the effects I've done in my personal scenes are really there just to support my environment artwork. And I've never really finessed any VFX or anything like that in my shots. But yeah, it means that I've been able to push environment art um, to a level where I'm more confident in my own skills because I've not really had the noise of wanting to do everything else, if you know what I mean.
Totally. Yeah, no, I think that's an important lesson. I mean, arguably you'd go down as saying focus is a big part of your success.
Yes. Yeah. I've just never had the want to do any of the other things, so I've never had that noise in my head. For maybe this time I should try doing this thing, or this time I should try doing this other complete discipline. I've just focused on environment art.
Yeah. Um, but I would say environment art is probably one of the most dynamic areas right now. I mean, for at least the last like 8+ years, it's
Mhm.
changed so much.
Yeah, yeah. That and I suppose character art also. There's a lot of techniques that go hand in hand with both.
Hmm.
Um, you can do more in environments now, like way more.
Yeah.
Uh, Real time. I know some cinematic companies are looking towards real time and things like Unreal um, over the pre-rendered workflow, or at least to integrate it into part of the pre-rendered workflow
Hmm.
to just speed things up. Because I guess it's the main thing, the main pain working in a offline rendering pipeline is that you have to hit render and then wait. Uh, and sometimes to see the results of something that you're making can take, I don't know, you might be sat there for about half an hour twiddling your thumbs before you realize that something's wrong and then you've got to re-render it again.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, for the first for the first few months, that was my biggest pain. Especially as yeah, in real time stuff, you just like slap textures on, edit them a little bit, press save, and then boom, it's come back up in Unreal or Marmoset or whatever real time program it is you're using to view your
Hmm.
work. Um, but yeah, it's come along loads, like you say.
Yeah. And when you started, was Substance a big deal?
It was becoming a big deal. I remember in my interview for Splash Damage, the guys had asked me how much I'd had a look at it.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the pieces that I'd made in anticipation of going out to try and get another job was for the Substance competition. I can't remember what it was called. I think it was called the Throne Room one. This one here. Um, so I'd made this using, I say very early Substance, but it says here Substance Designer 5. So there were at least 5 along in iterations. But it was just becoming a big thing for game production.
Hmm.
This was 4 years ago. Geez. Uh, so I dabbled in it then. That was the first time that I'd started using it. And the guys there in my interview had asked me a lot about it and what I thought about it and how we could integrate it into our pipeline. And pretty much from then on, we started using Substance when I got in there and never turned back.
That's awesome. Um, what is it still a big part, or let's just stay within your real-time world and then we'll get into the cinematics. Within
Yeah.
the real-time world, is Substance Designer still like a really big part of it? Did you ever shift to Substance Painter?
So the only time I ever used Substance Designer was on that piece,
Got
and
it.
then outside of that, it was all Painter. So we spent a lot of time still sculpting things in ZBrush
Hmm.
for like tiling textures and stuff.
Yeah.
Mostly because we didn't have the need to do what Designer does best, which is allow you to make a brick wall and then you can like just change the pattern and then you've got a different type of brick wall. We didn't
Right.
have so much of a need for that. So we were just making really bespoke things, really bespoke tiling textures, or we were sculpting really bespoke like hero props for a map. Just because of the nature of the beast of the maps that we were making at the time, just meant that
Mhm.
we had to make the more bespoke things. So we never had much of a need for designer, so we just went down the painter route for pretty much everything. And I've never, as much as I say I would love to, I've never really gotten back into it. It's something that I always sit there and say, next project, I'm going to start doing some designer stuff, and I've just
Right.
never got to it.
Yeah, we had an interview with somebody that was on the Substance team that talked about the percentages of how much was what, and it's like if I remember correctly, Painter was like 70% of the market,
Right.
So designer, and this is a while ago, so designer is a smaller part of it, but painter is their beast, and that was of course before alchemist and some of that stuff that comes up now.
Right.
But that's interesting to hear that that's your focus, because when we look at the software that's out there, like in here, I'm speaking to people that are starting and they're trying to figure out, what do I do? What do I create? We tend to focus on software. We tend to be like, okay, so I got to learn Substance, I got to learn ZBrush, I got to learn Designer, I got to learn, all of these things. What advice do you give to people, like when they say, what do I have to do to get a job? What do you think they have to do?
Um, there's a core set of programs that you would need to know. I have worked at studios where, although I've never worked anywhere that's used anything outside of Max or Maya. Um, so that's always been either one of those has always been the main modeling software. Uh, the place where I am now, other people do use other things, and they've been integrated somewhat into the pipeline. But I've never been anywhere that said you have to use this one software to model in as long as you get an end result. Most places will have like a pipeline that means that you need to export out of one software,
Mm-hmm.
for modeling at least. So you'll at least need to know how to get things in and out of that software. It makes things easier if people are using relatively the same softwares. But for modeling, Max or Maya generally, Substance for texturing, either or, Substance Painter for sure. Substance Designer if you feel like what you want to do is make tiling textures,
Mm-hmm.
doing some really crazy material tricks. If you feel like you can do that quicker than modeling these things, then by all means, I don't think anyone would ever stop you from doing it. But both substances are good to have a base knowledge in, um, and I guess a base knowledge of Photoshop. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's only really to help things that maybe you need to tweak after Substance, I suppose. I rarely use Photoshop at work.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I guess whatever, if you're looking to get into games, whatever real-time package, any real-time package, I suppose, just so you can understand the fundamentals. Unreal's free, I guess, so that's a great place to start. So is Unity. I've predominantly worked in Unreal Studios, but generally for things like that, they'll give you the time when you get there to learn how to use them, because not everyone should have to know how to use those things.
Got it. And I'm looking through your portfolio, and you've got some Netflix,
Yeah.
um, bunch of stuff. Is this all at Axis, or do you
The,
freelance?
the Netflix was a random one. Yeah, that's like the one freelance thing that I've ever done, which was quite cool. I had some downtime at work, and they just messaged me out of nowhere, and I couldn't say no to that.
Yeah, right.
That was fun. That was fun work. Yeah. I just made the tower, so the whole exterior for that tower. It was a fairly big job, but the fun of it kept me going through that. So I just came home from work and then smashed that out for a few days. But the
Awesome.
rest of the stuff's all Axis or Splash Damage or just my own stuff.
The Magic the Gathering, War of the
Yeah,
Spark.
that's at Axis.
Mm.
So that's the first project that was released since I've been working there. Um, that was great fun. It's an amazing video as well.
It
If
is.
anyone has the time, you should watch it.
Yeah, I've seen that. I love that. It's amazing. It's just so well done. When you're working on a project like that, like what part do you play in that? And some of this you may not be able to tell me, but like how large is the team? And what I'm really looking for is like, it's easy for people when they look at this art, they're just like, oh my God, it's so amazing. You did all this stuff, but there's a team behind this, right?
Yes. Well,
Can you
as
describe
always.
that? Yeah.
So there's yeah. I mean, the the way that things work at Axis means that it's hard to say exactly how many people are
Sure.
on a project at any given time, because there might be days when, I don't know, things are looking a bit bleak on one area, so we'll like pull in a bunch of guys from another area. So the number, I guess, can inflate. There's always
Yeah.
a more core team. I'd say artist wise on this, maybe like 6 or 7. I could be very wrong there, but in
Hmm.
terms of like environment artists and asset artists, there are some offsite guys, which is something that they do as well, and a lot of cinematic companies do. Like games companies tend to just outsource to studios in completely different places, whereas yeah, we tend to just like have a few outsource guys that we bring back often. and they can make props or assets or whatever. And then we tend to do like the more core environment stuff. So a lot of the world building and some of the larger environment set pieces, or just making sure that the world building sorted. So in this, I personally did quite a few of the architectural elements that you can see in these images. So this section back here, these pillars, it's another person's responsibility to help get them all into scene. So you can work quite isolated at times. It's good not to. It's nice that we all sit next to each other so we can all look at things. We can all talk about things and review things. But generally, it's a good few people working on something. I'd say for most of these shots, it's like 4 artists working together. Although I tried to pick the shots where I had most of the work in it, just so that it's better to show that in your portfolio. It's easier to describe. But yeah, it's a good group effort for sure.
And are you compositing these in Unreal still, or when you get into cinematics, are you guys shifting over to Maya or Max or
So these were done through Houdini. I can't remember which renderer we use.
Wait, the whole thing, the animation, everything in Houdini?
No. The animation and stuff's all done in Maya, and then everything's brought in and rendered through Houdini. World building's all done in Houdini as well.
That's okay. Do you model in Houdini?
No, I model in Maya. I do the world building and bringing the scene together is all done in Houdini. I'm model in Maya. Other people model in Modo or Blender and some other programs, and just bring it all together here. Our pipeline is mostly geared towards Maya, and all of our exporters and things like that are all done in Maya. So you need a base knowledge of Maya to get everything out in the end.
Okay, but it comes in and it's almost like Houdini is your Unreal.
Yes, it is. Yeah, that's the studio's pipeline.
Okay, got it. And I'm imagining that's where because there's a lot of debris, there's a lot of like set dressing. If you were doing a real-time environment, this is like dressed to the hilt.
Yeah. So I guess a lot of this stuff wouldn't. It might exist, I suppose. It depends on the level. It's really hard to say whether things would or wouldn't exist. I guess there would be more repetition in things if it was in game. Maybe less of the super small scale stuff. But then if you play games like Wolfenstein, there's tons of debris everywhere. So it just depends on how things are optimized. I suppose the debris wouldn't be as high fidelity if it was in game. But this is all pre-rendered, so there's just scattering everywhere.
Yeah, got it. All right. So as I'm looking at your work, one of the things, especially for an environment artist, I mean, number one, what is an environment artist? Like there's multiple layers to that, right? Is there a definition that you have for like what an environment artist does, or how you classify
No,
yourself?
I've worked at places where, as an environment artist, all I did was world building. I've worked in places where, as an environment artist, I got to do some assets too. Where I am now, I do a bit of everything that is in the environment. So yeah, individual assets, scattering, learning anything new that helps really to push the environment. You might find guys Axis that do lighting, and there'll be some environment guys that do some compositing. So it's good to know a few different things. But in games, for sure, it generally means an asset or asset artist or a world builder, or maybe you do both.
And then is there some what I'm noticing here is there's rock and there's metal. Not a lot of foliage. I see one foliage piece. Do you
Yes.
find that the industry kind of segregates in that way, or do you find that people, you have to be able to do it all?
Yeah, for foliage for sure. You tend to find guys that do foliage or see themselves as like quote unquote foliage artists. Or the studio might get someone in that does foliage particularly well. I just happen to have not worked on any games that have a lot of foliage. Gears of War has like no foliage.
Yeah.
And why that is, I'm not too. I guess everything's about metal and it needs to be hard and grungy and concrete. So there's not much room for leaves and stuff in there. I actually did that one foliage piece in my portfolio because I was like, I'm doing no foliage ever, so it would be cool to do something someday. Which is what I tend to do with a lot of my personal portfolio pieces, is just do something different to what I'm doing at work. I find it helps me get through that. If I just do the same thing as what I'm doing at work, then my brain will turn off it very easily.
That's a good point. Actually, I was just in a interview, somebody was interviewing me, and we were talking about, how in the beginning we can be kind of, well, the way I phrased it was we're very transactional. It's like I'm going to put together a foliage scene. I'm going to put together a temple jungle scene. I'm going to put together a underground jungles or dungeon scene, right? And because we're trying to create a portfolio that's going to help us get a job.
Hmm.
But I'm looking at this, and I mean the breadth of your work, and what do you do to kind of keep yourself motivated and keep yourself creating? Because you've got a lot of beautiful stuff here. There's the science center, um, atrium, cryogenics, lost
Well,
worlds.
firstly, thank you. And I I was trying to think about this today, and mostly it's I just stop doing something if I find it unenjoyable.
Hmm.
So I have a lot of dead projects, and I've tried to work now in a way where I'll just do the things that excite me, and then by the time I've got enough of the things that excite me done, I should have something that's far enough along that I tell myself, you can't not finish this now. It's it's at like 75 to 80% done. You may as well finish it. Yeah, I've got a lot of dead projects, um, which never made it anywhere because I got really bored with them. And I just think as soon as you get bored, just kill it. Find something that interests you. Life's too short to be doing projects that you're not enjoying. Just
Hmm.
just kill them and find something else. Maybe just take a few days and look around the outside when you're walking around and see what piques your interest, and then give that a go. But I generally, yeah, I just do the stuff that I enjoy at the start, and then hope that that carries me through the project.
Are you surprised that, especially I notice this as I get older. I don't know if you notice as you get older, but are you surprised that you're able to keep doing this and make a living and somebody's paying you for this?
Every day, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 every day.
I was
Sometimes I
just,
sit there at work and I'm just like, whoa, this is real
yeah,
life.
yeah. Uh, a lot of people will ask, like, am I too old for this, right? And I love it when I get somebody who says, am I too old for this? And they're like 28.
Right.
And
Yeah,
and I'm like,
yeah.
I just had this interview, and the guy, so back in 2004, you were, and I'm like, no, it wasn't 2004. Don't say that out loud. What the hell, right?
Yeah,
They're like
yeah.
2004, you joined Pixelogic, and I'm like, was it that long ago? Oh my God.
Yeah, it's crazy. No, I don't think, as long as you are willing to keep up with programs and the progress of the discipline, and you keep your art fresh, and you still have an interest and a thirst in the discipline, right?
Hmm.
Then what does age matter really? It's one of these ageless jobs, right? As long as my brain still works, I should be able to keep doing this. As long as I still have a thirst for wanting to do it, I mean, my body could be run down, and as long as I can click my mouse, then
Hmm.
then I'm going to keep doing it, right? There are guys. I mean, I've worked at places where there are guys that are young that aren't really into it, and you can tell they're not really into it. And I just think, why are you doing this? And then you get some guys that are a lot older that are super into it, and you're like, yeah, this is for you. It doesn't really matter how old you are.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it's, you mentioned staying up to date on, because stuff does change, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the last 7 years, and then, I joined Pixelogic 2004. Thank you, Alex, for reminding me. And that changed so much right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
We're due actually for another change, I think, because there was ZBrush, then there was Substance. Like, I don't know what's up next, but do you have a sense of like any change in what's kind of happening or coming up, or something we should focus on?
Um, I guess I see the thing that I see mostly being used more in especially cinematics is the scans.
Yeah.
Um, we use depending on the project, I suppose, and what licenses we have for things. But yeah, a lot of scans, um, especially for things like large rock pieces or
Hmm.
things like that, that would take just simply too long to sit there and try and sculpt to get to the definition that you need for something to be completely realistic.
Right.
Game, it's not always so necessary because you're going for that game aesthetic a lot of the time, right? There aren't so many games that are trying to hit like ultra realism, just because to some degree it isn't possible in real time running at 60 frames per second on everyone's computers, but also because
Right.
games in a lot of games there are so many stylistic choices and decisions coming from art directors or people, and you don't want to go for that super realistic aesthetic. So it's not used so much. I guess it will be more. I think on Battlefront was it? It's scans were used loads. So I do see that being used more and more, and maybe more higher quality versions of those being integrated into pipelines for sure.
Do you find that that's actually where people are bringing their own scan team on? Like somebody should learn photogrammetry, or are we talking about like mega scans and using platforms? Because I've heard both sides of that.
Yeah, Megascans is that's like the go-to.
Yeah.
I know if there are people in the studio that have a thirst for scanning, they get pointed at very early. So it's a good thing to want to do, especially in a cinematic studio. I think and more and more increasingly, I suppose games. So if you're into games, it's also a good thing to look at. I think focusing on that strictly, and not focusing on some of the fundamentals of creating your own game art, is probably not the best idea, especially as you're starting out. But having a look at it and trying to get used to it, trying to work it out and get a workflow going is definitely a good idea.
Fair enough. So don't just make your portfolio about scans.
No, I wouldn't say so. There are only, especially if you're trying to get hired off the bat, you're limiting the amount of people who are going to hire you massively at that point.
Yeah,
And
totally.
trying to get hired out of any college or university or course, you want to try and widen the net as much as possible. I would say personally.
Okay, and that brings up the question of aesthetics, and one of the things I like to recommend to people is when you're creating a portfolio, you should know where you want to work because you don't want to show up to Blizzard with a Naughty Dog portfolio. It's just
Hmm.
apples and oranges.
Hmm.
There's some overlap, but like if I'm looking here at the book of Tyrell, the Corrupted, this is a project you did for yourself, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It's this beautiful, like it's stylized, but it's actually realistic. And then it's lit. You got the blue on the one side, and you got the candlelight on the other. So, the aesthetic. Talk to me about the aesthetic and like what you do to kind of really develop your capacity there.
So I'm trying to think of when I did this. It says 3 years ago, but a year is a long time. Let me
Yes.
just look at where it's been. Uh, so I guess this would have been around Gears of War. Um, I can say that I wasn't doing this for the attention of Blizzard, but I think maybe I was. Who knows?
Hmm.
Um, I think yeah, it's always good to try and do something that interests you. And I think I'd seen some of the Diablo cinematics at the time, and just thought that they looked awesome, and I wanted to try and create that level of detail and get that aesthetic working in their cinematics in something that was real time.
Hmm.
So that was just a decision that I made to do and to try that. And it's something that, again, that I wasn't doing at work at all. The way that this looks is nothing like how Gears of War looks, although there is a lot of metal there, in terms of the thickness of the metals and the finish on them. It's not as Gears as I guess Gears is. So I was just trying to do something different there.
You build this in Substance.
Yes. No.
Um,
Let me remember. Let me remember.
I think it says here, yeah. So you could learn Substance Painter.
Yes, it was modeled. Yeah. I textured it all in Substance Painter. Yeah, it
Okay.
was modeled as you see it. The high poly looks like this, and
Okay.
then
And then did you export to like Marmoset or Unreal? Do you remember?
I think this was in Marmo. Yeah.
Okay. Do you find it's important for people to know Unreal per se in this industry, or Marmoset okay?
Yeah, I try now to just do things in Unreal because I know that you can make things look much better in Marmoset than
Yes.
and now especially with like the GI and stuff like that in
Yeah.
Marmoset. Like at the time that I did that book, Marmoset probably looked very similar to what you could get out of Unreal, present day Unreal.
Yeah.
But now I try to just, if I'm making a scene especially, I'll just do it in Unreal. And maybe that's also because I know how, from working in Unreal for so long, I just know how to get the result that I want.
Yeah.
It's just easier in my mind. But I
Easier.
wouldn't say I wouldn't say a potential hirer would sit there and say, this is not in Unreal, this is in Marmoset. That's probably not what it would look like in game, because it is a real time engine to some degree.
Okay, good. That's exactly where I was going because Unreal is not without its kind of intellectual overhead, right? Like creating
Mhm.
scalars on each one of your texture maps and dealing with sRGB and all that stuff. Can be a
Yeah.
bit, can be a bit, of a headache.
Yes, the node workflow for materials, and I think it's someday they've got to change that, right? And just have like a material setup that where you just like press a button and it imports the textures and it looks like how Marmoset has it instead of having to create nodes for things.
Yeah.
But at this point in my mind, that's as easy as doing it in Marmoset, so that doesn't concern me. But I know there was a time when looking at that was like, whoa, why has this not just got like a regular interface?
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I guess I'm at a position now where that doesn't concern me. But I do understand that it would, and I don't think any hirer would look at someone that uses Marmoset and say, oh, they're not using Unreal there.
Got it. Now, if we look at your temple, the Lost Vimana temple,
This one,
um,
yeah,
yeah. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of that, for those who are here watching this live, but we'll talk it through it. At the bottom of it, there's your kit.
yeah.
Modularity is obviously it's very important for environment arts, but I've interviewed lots of people, and some people will do modularity. Some people would be like, I just kind of, I just kind of built it, all as a one-off.
Mhm.
Uh, was this when you build something like this? Are you literally building your kit first and assembling it, or how do you talk to me about your process? I guess.
So yeah, for this one in particular, I suppose it was the concept lent itself to working modularly
Hmm,
anyway.
fair enough.
Um, but in working at Splash Damage on Gears of War, modularity, and because we worked with on our maps, we worked with a large kit base of different things, and then we used that kit base to make maps, and then we worked out how we could make those maps different, and then we made those things to make that map different. But at
Hmm.
its core, we used a kit, and that has been ingrained into my mind. Um, and now when I see a piece of concept art, or I wish I could bring it up now, but I didn't have it. Do I have a link to it here? Oh, I do. Um, so if you see this concept,
Hmm.
as soon as I saw it, I was thinking, okay, I can make this in like 7 parts or 8 parts or however many were there. And I know that I can make those parts look as good as I can make them look in the time frame that I have. So from that moment on, I was in love with the piece and I said, I'll just get the block out done for this. I can see the different bits that I'm going to work on. There'll be like this spire here, this section of the door, then all of these windows and modular pieces, and then these pillars and blah blah blah. And it just worked well for the competition because it was in a time scale, right?
Hmm.
So I just got the block out done, and then you can. I quite like work. Sorry, I quite like working like this where you'll have a block out for something, and then you can see the individual assets, and then you just break those individual assets off and then work on them in isolation. I'll do one as like the benchmark piece. Sometimes that's a material as well. So I think I did one of these materials first, maybe this brick section, just to try and get a feel for what I want the scene to look like material
Hmm.
wise. And then I'll just work on the pieces in isolation, one after the other, and just keep popping them into the scene. And then every day I've worked on it to a level, I'll just take a screenshot of it and I'll just look over it and see where I want to go next.
When you're working on them in isolation or as the materials, is that still painter, no designer?
Yeah, these guys were all painter as well.
Wow.
Yeah, I made those in Maya and then sculpted them all and then textured them in Painter.
Okay. Awesome. Um, so the modularity, I understand. I love I think kitbashing.com. It's actually run by a couple of really cool guys. Um, so when we look at somebody with their kit, we get it. Like it makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, but there's another approach to modeling, and actually, Ken, good to see you here, Ken. One of the boot campers, Ken, is asking about trim sheets
Yeah.
because I don't know how to say it, but I mean, it's like that's not talked about enough, in my opinion. Could you kind of explain that or help us understand that a little bit?
Yeah. So, sorry, that get really loud. Trim sheets are an integral part of all environment art in games, in my
Hmm.
perspective. You need to know how to make and use them. Um, I say make and use them because it's good to know when you look at a scene what things you can make from trim, because then you're saving everywhere when you're using those, because you're using one texture set, and it's easy to just sew things together, which is what I did a fair bit here in So these guys are technically trim textures. You can see where my mouse is pointing, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So those two are technically trim textures, and I just use those to sew up and finish any of the pillar sections, and just bring things together where necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And those are really useful because, yeah, as I say, they're one texture set, and you can just model your geometry and then map to them, and it doesn't need like super bespoke sculpting or whatever. There are a few other projects that I use them on. So this one especially, like all of these sections here, all of these sections along here, all of the pieces that run along each other, they're all trims. Almost
We're
all of
talking
this.
about the throne room right now.
Yeah. Almost all of these sections around here are made with trim as well. And it just helps you tie a scene together and bring all of the assets together.
Mm-hmm.
In the latest thing I did, I think I've got. Yeah, so in here, this is the latest thing I did. And it's just broken down into, how do I zoom in? The individual assets, and the gray sections all trim. So you can see how I'm sewing together assets and elements of the architecture with the trim textures. And it just enables you to create like longer sections as well. So if I was to try and model and then bake these long sections, the resolution would be terrible. So what you can get from trims is more resolution into like larger scale assets, and you can just tie things together. Some people do entire scenes using just trim sets, which is possible if you plan it out right. So it's good to just like look at what it is you're going to make and say what things you can make out of trim and what not, because the trim will help you save on resolution as well. You'll be able to get like a lot better resolution into meshes with it over baking them on their own.
How do you avoid the repetition?
Planning and texturing your trims in a way that doesn't allow for repetition, so you need them to be plain. If you add too much textural information into trims, they will repeat very obviously. You can do things like just use the normal from your trim, and then in Unreal use masks and other scale tiling textures so that it breaks the repetition.
Okay.
So you could have your diffuse set and your roughness set using a different set of tiling textures to your trim, and have those tilings set differently so that you don't get the same repeat across an object. That's done a fair bit as well. I think Star Citizen use that as a workflow too.
Okay. And is that multiple UV sets, or am I misunderstanding that?
That would be, yeah. That would be using UV sets, yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so those are just the efficiencies within Unreal.
Yes, yeah. I guess I'm not too sure. I mean, you could use it if you were pre-rendering in Maya. I'm not too sure if you can make that work in Marmoset.
Got it.
I think you must be able to by now. I'm not sure though.
But essential, right?
Yes, especially if you're doing. I mean, I would say sci-fi stuff. Gears of War was sci-fi. Sci-fi stuff is used a lot. In Gears of War, we used it a lot as well. So in things like this, all of these edge runners in the War map, these are all trim. Everything's so in this environment up together. All of these sections here, these are all bits of trim, and they're used all the time in games, like all the time.
Got it. All right, so we got a question in here from Joey. How you doing, Joey? And Ken, did that get you some answer to your question, or did you have another one? Make sure you put it in there real quick, and I'll make sure I get it. Okay, good. Thanks, Ken. All right, so Joey is asking, I'm like reading, is asking, when you're looking to hire environment artists, what do you look for in their portfolio? And so if we, I don't know, how comfortable you are or what you can say with Axis, but like you can pick anything, like if you're at Gears or if you're at Axis or anything, or just what do you look for in a portfolio? And he's saying, so artists that recreate concept art or artists that make their own art?
At your stage at this, I'm assuming that you're coming out of a course. We are not looking specifically for someone to be making out their own things off of concept. Not off of concept. In studio work, we use concepts all the time. Things go best if there is a concept. Things can get a bit janky here and there if there aren't concepts. So it's always good to have at least an overarching concept of an area or an idea or something like that. So seeing that people can work from concept for us, hiring people is always a plus. Seeing you can work from without a concept is awesome too. But I think there's more value in knowing that you can recreate something faithfully from a concept for sure.
Is there some how do I say this? Because concepts can, I mean, it can be vast. Like we can run into problems with it. And I've run into this with students before, where it's like, here's the Aztec city. So, so then it's like, okay, there goes the next year of your life, right? You got
Yeah.
to focus. Um, do you think, is there some particular way that they should think about framing what they do? You know, because at your stage, you can create the Hindu temple and the mountain in the back and the ground plane and all that, but that's a lot for some people.
Yes. I agree. So yes, it's good to pick maybe little vignettes of things. It doesn't need to be the entire concept that you've made.
Mhm.
No one's going to sit there and say, "Oh, you didn't get that bit there," or "You didn't get that bit there." Sometimes it might even be just looking at the scene and recreating an element of it or an idea in it,
Mhm.
and getting that across. And that's not to say that you should strictly always use concepts. Yeah, like I say, sometimes it might be that you see a concept and you say, "I want to push this idea that this concept is giving me," because sometimes especially in production, the concept isn't always the word of God. Sometimes it's something more loose, and you just need to get across the idea that's being displayed in it.
Mhm.
So picking a section, at the end of the day, you need to finish it, right? You want to get this piece done, to be able to show it to anyone. So if it's a huge concept, yeah, focus in on an element that you think is really interesting and get that done. But I would say that if you're trying to get a job somewhere, having a nicely done asset that's pushed to a high level and having a scene that's pushed to a high level, whether it be big or small, it doesn't really matter. Getting both of those things done so that people can see that you understand the fundamentals of world building and composition, and all of those things. Maybe a little bit of lighting, all of those things that finish a scene. No matter how big it is, just understanding that you know how to do that is good for us.
Is it more important for somebody to dive deep, maybe bite off a smaller chunk, but really make something polished, or is it more important to show that, you know, you can handle a bigger scene but maybe not have everything as developed?
I think finding the place in between those two is always best.
Okay.
Um, you don't need to go. That's why it's nice to have like a single asset that's pushed all the way somewhere in your
Mhm.
portfolio. Do that. Spend as long as you would spend on an entire scene on a single asset. Make that look awesome. But when it comes to like making the scene, a lot of what you're trying to bring across in the image can be done in composition and lighting and materials and stuff. Sometimes it doesn't need to be super dense with assets and things like that. So yeah, finding the place in between those two that you mentioned is probably the best in my opinion.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. Joey, does that answer your question? And this is a great time, guys. Got questions? Answer them. And then Floyd mentioned, Floyd, you're cool looking at a couple of people, students' work.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
And we don't have a ton of time with Floyd, so make sure that if you guys are going to do that, you get yourselves ready for when I ask and get your questions going. What do you love about this job, Floyd?
Um, oh, everything, man. I love waking up in the morning and thinking about how I'm gonna do the thing that I need to do that day, and not like thinking about it with dread.
Yeah.
Um, like I'll come home and I'll sit there and think about how I'm gonna push whatever it is that I left that night, which I enjoy. I like that. Yeah, you can. It depends, I suppose, massively on where you're working, but a lot of the places, most of the places that I've worked, except maybe one, you've always had the ability to train on the job for things. Um, so no one will just like throw you in at the deep end on something. If you need the training time to be able to work out how to do something, then that will be given to you. Someone will always know how to do it. Um, and then you can learn from them. Everyone really wants to share as well. That's what I love. You can speak to someone like in moving into cinematics. There's so many disciplines that I didn't even know existed, and everyone in those disciplines, when I've had to work on something with them or whatever, has been so willing to share because it's art at the end of the day, right? And everyone in an art perspective wants to share what it is that they do. It can be, I mean, I hate it when my girlfriend looks at pictures that I'm drawing before they're finished. It freaks me out. But if I'm sat next to someone at work and I'm not sure how it is that I need to finish this thing, we're all happy to just talk to each other about how it is to push that image and get the final result. That's what I love the most. It's just the collaborative nature of everything that we're doing.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's probably an important thing for people to remember, because it's easy when you're on your own to get isolated and feel like I gotta do everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they are judged on how they can do basically everything that they did by themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose that's where it makes it hard when you're trying to make a portfolio to get a job. But the main thing I would say is to just always talk and show your work to other people and get their perspective on things. Every time that I'm at like 85%, 80%, 90% on something, I'll bite the bullet and ask everyone at work that will listen, what do you think of this and how do you think I could push it? And I'll be honest with people, if I'm in like the last 10% and I don't have enough in me to go back and like remodel things, I'll say, how can I push this outside of that, right? And they'll give you all of the things that they see wrong with the image, and you can pull however much of that or not however much of that you want into the image. But it's good to, and it's good to hear what other people say, because even if you don't do it that time, the next time you can think about it. So just always be talking to people about your artwork, and it will make you feel less isolated. Try not to be so precious about it as well. And that will come after years and years of having people critique your work. I know it's probably hard at the start, but try not to be so precious about what it is that you've made. I know it's your baby and you love it, right? But someone will see something that you can do to make it better. And at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do, is to make a better image.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good point. Alistair's got a question. He says, if you receive an application from someone who has not had formal training in 3D modeling, and by that he means degree, and we were talking about this earlier, but it's coming from another field, like let's just say photography or something. Would you be doing, what kind of probing would you be doing with them in the interview in terms of understanding where they are? So what he's asking is, I don't have a degree, but what kind of questions does somebody get asked, or what kind of things do they have to prove in an interview or in the beginning of the job to show that they can do this?
If I'm in all of my hiring process years, I have never looked at someone's formal qualifications.
Yes.
It's mostly, and I would say it's all down to the artwork and you as a person.
Yeah.
We can, especially at your position, we have to understand that you've never worked in a studio before, right? And working in a classroom or in group projects is very different to working in a studio. And I'm not saying it's not useful, but that doesn't translate really, I would say, into a studio situation. So we're looking at that stage at you as a person, and just making sure that you're sound and you seem like, one, you'd be able to take critique and not freak out, and two, you have a real thirst for what it is that you're doing, and then also the quality of work that you have. So I've never seen that someone's not gone to university and then had questions to probe into things that would be different about them from someone who has gone to university. I'm not quite sure even what would be different if the artwork that you're producing is of a good enough quality.
Right. That's a good point. That's great. All right. Thank you so much. That's awesome. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. Floyd, man, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to meet and have a conversation with you. I really appreciate you taking the time.
No worries, man. Thank you for that. I hope that was good enough.
That was awesome. That was great. And every bit helps here. So Thomas is sending you a note right there. All right. Well, I think that's about everything. That's everything I've seen. So again, thank you, Floyd, so much, man. Thank you. We really appreciate that.
No worries. Yeah, thank you for giving me a shout for this. It was a good time. Good fun.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, guys. Take care, Floyd.
Okay, perfect. See you all later. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. So I want to thank you so much for being here, for taking the time, and for listening to this podcast. And I want to ask a couple of things from you. Number one, make sure you leave a comment or you rate this on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever it is that you're getting this. That's going to make a big difference in helping us get the word out and get people to know who we are. All right. The other thing is I want to make sure you know where to find us. So you can head over to www.gameartinstitute.com, where you can learn about our flagship program, which is the Game Artist Bootcamp. This is designed for those who are really looking to move the needle on their career and really lock in that job. You may have gone to school and learned a bunch, maybe haven't learned a bunch. But at the Game Art Institute, the primary focus we have is the very specific industry skills, the triggers that you really need to hit in that job interview. What are the specific things that they're looking for? That's what we're going to be training you on. We're taking applications right now for environment artists and for character artists. So make sure you head over to www.gameartinstitute.com and apply today. That way we can have that conversation, make sure this is a fit for you, make sure that you're a fit for it, and if everything is perfect, then we will sign you up for that right away and get you into your training and start moving the needle on your career. All right? Thank you so much again for being here. Take care. Have an amazing day.